The amber liquid caught the overhead lights as Raven Blackthorn set down another whiskey at table 7. Her movements were precise, economical, the kind of efficiency that spoke of muscle memory forged in cockpits, not cocktail bars. The neon clock above the bar read 12:47 a.m., and the dive bar on the edge of Nellie's Air Force Base was winding down to its usual collection of off-duty mechanics and gate guards nursing their last drinks. She'd been invisible here for 3 months, just another waitress in a town full of them, serving overpriced bourbon to airmen who thought they knew what real flying looked like. The irony wasn't lost on her. She who had once commanded the skis now commanded nothing more than drink orders and tips that barely covered her studio apartment rent. The door chimed, and 3 men in pressed uniforms entered. Even in the dim lighting, their bearing screamed senior command. The tallest one, a colonel with graying temples, surveyed the room with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. His eyes swept past her twice before stopping cold on the 3rd pass. Commander James Mitchell's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, then something approaching shock. He'd seen that precise way of moving before, that economy of motion that spoke of thousands of hours in high-performance aircraft. But it couldn't be. The woman who'd pulled off the most audacious aerial rescue in modern military history was supposed to be dead. "Gentlemen," he said quietly to his companions, never taking his eyes off Raven, "I need a moment." She noticed his stare and felt the familiar chill that came with recognition. 3 months of anonymity, of blessed invisibility, potentially shattered by a face from her past. She'd chosen this nowhere bar specifically because command officers never frequented it. Yet here stood Mitchell, the man who'd pinned the distinguished flying cross to her chest before everything went sideways. Raven continued her rounds, but her peripheral vision tracked every movement at the colonel's table. She could feel the weight of his stare, could practically hear the wheels turning in his tactical mind. In her previous life, she'd been worth 8 figures in training alone, the most expensive weapon in the Air Force's arsenal. Now she was worth exactly minimum wage plus whatever tips her charm could extract from drunk airmen. But Mitchell knew better. He knew that beneath the waitress uniform was a pilot whose reflexes had been honed by machines that moved faster than sound, whose tactical brilliance had saved lives when conventional wisdom said it was impossible. The question wasn't whether he recognized her. The question was what he intended to do about it. Mitchell dismissed his companions with a subtle hand gesture, the kind of wordless communication that senior officers perfected over decades of command. They left without question, understanding that whatever was happening here required privacy. The bar's ambient noise, clinking glasses, muted conversations, the distant hum of slot machines seemed to fade as he approached her station near the back wall. "Captain Blackthorn," he said quietly, using her former rank like a key turning in a lock. Raven's hand stilled on the glass she'd been wiping. She didn't look up immediately, instead finishing the methodical cleaning motion she'd started. Old habits. Complete the task, then assess the threat. "I think you have me confused with someone else, sir," she replied, her voice carrying just enough West Texas drawl to sound authentic. "Name's Rebecca. Been working here since spring." Mitchell pulled out his phone, swiped to a photograph, and placed it face up on the bar. The image showed a woman in a flight suit standing next to an F-22 Raptor, her helmet tucked under one arm, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. The resemblance to the waitress was undeniable, though the woman in the photo carried herself with the confident bearing of someone who owned the sky. "Operation Crimson Dawn," Mitchell said softly. "Syria. You flew into a hot zone that had already claimed 2 aircraft, pulled out a downed Special Forces team while taking surface-to-air fire from 3 directions. They gave you the DFC for that mission." Raven finally looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was steel there, the kind forged in crisis and tempered by loss. "They gave her the medal," she corrected. "Then they buried her career 6 months later when the politics shifted." The colonel leaned back slightly, processing this. He'd heard rumors, of course. Whispered conversations in Pentagon corridors about one of their best pilots being quietly shuffled out after asking uncomfortable questions about mission parameters and acceptable losses. The official story was medical discharge, something vague about stress reactions and fitness for duty. "What are you doing here, Raven?" The use of her call sign was deliberate, a recognition of who she really was beneath the carefully constructed civilian identity. "Surviving," she said simply, returning to her cleaning routine. "Same thing we're all doing." "You know there's a situation developing, something that might require—" He paused, choosing his words carefully in the public space. "Specialized aviation expertise." Raven's laugh held no humor. "You mean something that requires someone expendable enough to fly missions your regular pilots won't touch?" Mitchell's jaw tightened. "I mean something that requires the best pilot we've ever had." "That pilot died in a Pentagon conference room 18 months ago," Raven replied. "She's buried under so much classified paperwork that she might as well be 6 feet underground. What you see here is what's left." But even as she spoke the words, something flickered in her expression, a spark of the old fire that had once burned bright enough to illuminate entire combat zones. The bar's closing time ritual played out around them as Mitchell waited. Raven moved through her duties with mechanical precision, wiping down tables, stacking chairs, counting the register. He watched her work, noting the way she automatically cleared sight lines, positioned herself near exits, kept her back to walls. Combat awareness didn't simply disappear because someone traded flight suits for civilian clothes. "Walk with me," Mitchell said as she finished locking the register. Outside, the desert air carried the scent of sage and jet fuel. Nellies never truly slept. Somewhere in the distance, engines wound up for night training exercises. The sound made Raven's shoulders tense slightly, muscle memory responding to familiar stimuli. They walked in silence toward the base perimeter, past the chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security lights cast harsh shadows, creating pockets of darkness that seemed to move with their footsteps. "I pulled your file," Mitchell began. "The real one, not the sanitized version they keep in personnel." "That's above your clearance level, Colonel. Some things are worth the career risk." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You want to know what really happened after Crimson Dawn?" Raven kept walking, but her pace slowed. "I know what happened. I asked too many questions about why we were losing so many aircraft to what should have been routine missions. Suggested that someone in the chain of command might be compromising operational security. 2 weeks later, I was seeing a psychiatrist who decided I had adjustment disorders." "The psychiatrist was compromised," Mitchell said quietly. "Part of a network we've been tracking for 2 years. Your questions got too close to something they needed buried." She stopped walking now, turning to study his face in the harsh security lighting. "And you're telling me this why? Guilty conscience." "Because 3 days ago, we lost another pilot. Same circumstances, same tactical picture that you identified 18 months ago. And because the situation has evolved beyond what conventional assets can handle." The sound of an F-35 passing overhead filled the silence between them. Raven's eyes tracked its navigation lights automatically, her brain calculating altitude, airspeed, probable flight path. Some instincts never died. "What kind of situation?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. Mitchell pulled out a tablet, swiped to a classified briefing document. "The kind that requires someone who can fly a $30 million aircraft like it's an extension of their nervous system. The kind that requires someone who's already been written off as dead, which makes them perfect for missions that don't officially exist." Raven looked at the tablet, then back at his face. "And if I say no?" "Then you go back to serving drinks, and someone else tries to handle a situation they're not qualified for. More pilots die, and whatever's happening out there continues to happen." She was quiet for a long moment, listening to the distant sounds of the base around them. "You're not offering me my life back," she said finally. "You're offering me a chance to die for the same people who destroyed my career." "I'm offering you a chance to fly again," Mitchell replied. "Everything else is secondary." The secure briefing room at 600 hours felt like stepping back in time. Raven sat at the familiar oval table, surrounded by the institutional beige walls and harsh fluorescent lighting that characterized classified spaces throughout the military. The chair felt foreign after months of standing behind a bar, but the atmosphere, that particular tension that preceded dangerous missions, was as familiar as breathing. Mitchell entered with two other officers, a thin, nervous-looking intelligence analyst clutching a tablet, and a woman with colonel's eagles who moved with the predatory grace of a combat veteran. Raven recognized the type immediately, special operations background, probably with more classified missions than official commendations. "Captain Blackthorne," the female colonel said, extending a hand. "Elena Vasquez, Special Activities Division, your reputation precedes you." Raven shook the offered hand, nodding the firm grip and the small scar along Vasquez's knuckles. "My reputation got me discharged, Colonel." "Your reputation is why you're here," Vasquez replied, settling into her chair. "We need someone who thinks 3 steps ahead of conventional tactics." The intelligence analyst, his nameplate read THORNFIELD, activated the room's projection system. A satellite image filled the wall screen, showing a desert landscape broken by mountain ridges and valleys. Grid coordinates in the corner identified it as somewhere in the Middle East. 17 days ago, Thornfield began, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to briefing senior officers, "we lost contact with a reconnaissance satellite over this region. Standard orbital mechanics suggested mechanical failure, but the telemetry data showed something else." The image shifted to a computer-generated trajectory plot. A red line traced the satellite's path, ending abruptly in what appeared to be empty airspace. "The satellite was destroyed," Vasquez said flatly. "Shot down by something operating at an altitude where no known surface-to-air system should be effective." Raven leaned forward, studying the display. "Ground-based directed energy weapons." "That was our initial assessment," Thornfield replied. "Until we lost the second satellite. Same region, same altitude, same signature. But this time, we had multiple observation platforms monitoring the area." A new image appeared, thermal imaging showing bright streaks moving across the screen at impossible speeds. The timestamp indicated the footage was taken at night, and the heat signatures were unlike anything in the current threat assessment database. "Unknown aircraft," Raven said, recognition dawning. "Operating above service ceiling for any known platform." "Unknown aircraft with technology that shouldn't exist," Mitchell corrected. "We've identified at least 6 separate incidents where conventional assets have been engaged by these platforms. They move faster than anything in our inventory, operate at altitudes that should be impossible for manned aircraft, and demonstrate tactical awareness that suggests advanced AI or exceptionally skilled pilots." Vasquez stood, walking to the projection screen. "3 of our pilots are dead, Captain. 2 more are in psychiatric care after encounters they can't adequately describe. Whatever's out there, it's not playing by the same rules we are." Raven absorbed this information, her tactical mind already beginning to process possibilities. "And you want me to what, exactly? Fly out there and see what shoots back?" "We want you to fly out there and eliminate the threat," Mitchell said simply, "using assets and tactics that aren't in any official playbook." The room fell silent except for the subtle hum of the ventilation system. Raven stared at the thermal images, watching the impossible flight paths traced by whatever was operating in that hostile airspace. "When do I leave?" she asked. The hangar at Area 51 existed in official denial, a structure that appeared on no public maps and consumed a budget that flowed through channels so classified that even congressional oversight committees received only sanitized summaries. Inside, beneath banks of harsh work lights, sat an aircraft that challenged every assumption about aerodynamic possibility. Raven stood in the shadow of the machine, running her eyes along its angular surfaces and impossible curves. The stealth coating absorbed light like a black hole, making it difficult to judge the craft's exact dimensions. What she could see suggested something halfway between an F-22 and a spacecraft from science fiction. "Aurora Project," said Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead engineer who'd been waiting in the hangar when they arrived. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's the most advanced aircraft ever built. Define advanced, Raven said, walking a slow circle around the machine. Her pilot's eye cataloged details. Air intakes designed for hypersonic flight, control surfaces that could articulate in ways that defied conventional wisdom, and sensor arrays that looked more like alien technology than human engineering. Mach 6 at operational ceiling, Chen replied. Service ceiling of 150,000 feet, stealth characteristics that make it essentially invisible to current radar systems, and flight characteristics that will challenge everything you think you know about flying. Vasquez joined them, tablet in hand. The Aurora has been in development for 15 years. Only 3 were ever built, and you'll be flying the only operational prototype. What happened to the other 2? Raven asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Test pilot error, Mitchell said, his tone suggesting the official explanation concealed more complex truths. The Aurora requires a different kind of thinking. Conventional pilot training actually becomes a liability at the performance levels this machine operates in. Chen activated a holographic display that materialized near the aircraft's nose. 3-dimensional schematics rotated in the air, showing internal systems that resembled nothing Raven had ever seen. The flight controls use a neural interface, Chen explained. Direct mental connection between pilot and aircraft systems. Response times are measured in milliseconds rather than the seconds required for conventional stick-and-rudder flying. Neural interface, Raven repeated, as in the plane reads my mind. More like you become part of the aircraft's decision-making process, Chen corrected. The Aurora's AI handles routine flight operations, altitude maintenance, navigation, threat assessment. You provide tactical judgment and combat decisions. Together, you become something greater than either human pilot or machine intelligence alone. Vasquez scrolled through technical specifications on her tablet. Learning curve is steep, but we don't have time for extended training. Intelligence suggests another satellite will be targeted within 72 hours. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Raven placed her hand on the Aurora's hull, feeling the subtle vibration of dormant systems. The surface was warm to the touch, as if the machine possessed some form of internal life. And if the neural interface doesn't work, she asked. If my brain isn't compatible with whatever alien technology you've built into this thing. Chen and Mitchell exchanged glances. Then we try to find another pilot, Mitchell said finally. But based on your psychological profile and combat experience, you're the most likely candidate to successfully integrate with the Aurora's systems. Most likely, Raven mused. That's reassuring. But even as she spoke, she felt something stirring inside her. The old hunger for flight, for the perfect marriage of pilot and machine that transformed routine transportation into poetry written across the sky. The neural interface helmet looked like something between medieval armor and science fiction nightmare. Dr. Chen adjusted the fit while Raven sat in the Aurora's cockpit, trying to familiarize herself with controls that bore only superficial resemblance to conventional aircraft systems. The seat molded itself to her body's shape, and she could feel subtle vibrations as the aircraft systems came online around her. The initial connection might feel disorienting, Chen said, her voice coming through the comm system with digital clarity. You'll experience sensory input that doesn't correspond to normal human perception. The key is not to fight it. Define, not fighting, something that's literally plugging into my nervous system, Raven replied, though her tone carried more curiosity than concern. She'd survived worse things than experimental technology. Mitchell's voice joined the conversation from the control booth overlooking the hangar. Remember, Captain, this is just a systems check. We're not attempting flight operations until you're fully integrated with the Aurora's neural network. Raven nodded and closed her eyes as Chen initiated the connection sequence. The first sensation was like a mild electric current running along her skull, followed by a strange doubling of awareness. She could still feel her own body in the pilot's seat, but simultaneously began to sense the aircraft systems as extensions of her own nervous system. The Aurora's sensors became additional senses. She could feel the hangar around her as a three-dimensional space defined by electromagnetic signatures and thermal patterns. Personnel moving near the aircraft registered as bright points of body heat and electrical activity. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like suddenly developing superhuman perception without the mental framework to process it. "Breathe," Chen's voice said, though it now seemed to come from inside her own thoughts rather than through the comms system. "Let the information flow through you rather than trying to analyze it." Gradually, the sensory chaos began to organize itself into comprehensible patterns. Raven found she could shift her awareness between normal human perception and the Aurora's enhanced sensor suite. The aircraft's AI felt like a presence in the back of her mind, not controlling her thoughts, but providing constant streams of tactical information and system status updates. "How are you feeling, Captain?" Mitchell's voice asked. "Like I'm becoming something other than human," Raven replied honestly. "But also like this is what I was always meant to do." She experimented with moving the Aurora's control surfaces, discovering that the aircraft responded to thought as much as physical manipulation of the controls. A mental command to test the left aileron produced an immediate response, smooth and precise beyond anything mechanical linkages could achieve. "Incredible," she breathed. "It's like the plane is reading my intentions." "Because it is," Chen confirmed. "The neural interface maps your decision-making patterns and translates them into flight control inputs faster than conscious thought. After full integration, you won't need to think about flying the aircraft. You'll simply think about where you want to go, and the Aurora will take you there." Raven spent another hour in the simulator, gradually expanding her integration with the aircraft systems. By the end of the session, controlling the Aurora felt as natural as walking. "Tomorrow, we attempt powered flight," Mitchell announced. "If the integration holds under actual flight conditions, we proceed to the mission briefing." Dawn at Groom Lake painted the desert in shades of amber and gold, the perfect conditions for a test flight that would either validate 15 years of theoretical engineering or destroy the most expensive aircraft prototype in military history. Raven sat in the Aurora's cockpit, neural interface active, feeling the subtle pulse of the aircraft systems synchronizing with her nervous system. The sensation was becoming familiar now, that strange doubling of awareness that let her experience flight through both human senses and the Aurora's vastly superior sensor suite. Through the aircraft's perception, she could feel the density of the air around them, the magnetic field variations that would affect navigation, even the gravitational microvariations that conventional instruments couldn't detect. "Aurora 1, you are cleared for taxi," came the voice from the control tower. Even the call sign felt different, not the casual radio chatter of normal flight operations, but the formal communication reserved for missions that pushed the boundaries of the possible. Raven engaged the taxiing systems with a thought, and the Aurora began to move with the fluid grace of something that had never been designed to merely roll along the ground. The aircraft wanted to fly. She could feel its yearning for the sky like a physical ache. "Power systems are nominal," she reported, though the words felt inadequate to describe what she was actually experiencing. Through the neural interface, she wasn't just monitoring the Aurora's engines. She was feeling their rhythm, sensing the complex dance of fuel flow and combustion that transformed chemical energy into thrust. "Copy, Aurora 1. You are cleared for takeoff. Maintain standard flight envelope for initial test parameters." Standard flight envelope. Raven almost laughed at the phrase. Nothing about the Aurora operated within standard parameters. Even its most conservative flight characteristics exceeded the performance of any operational aircraft. She advanced the throttles, not with her hands, but with direct mental command, and felt the Aurora's engines spool up to full military power. The acceleration pressed her back into the seat, but the sensation was different from conventional aircraft. Smoother, more controlled, as if the Aurora was designed to treat the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute constraints. Liftoff came at an airspeed that would have been impossible for conventional aircraft. The Aurora transitioned from ground roll to flight so seamlessly that Raven only realized they were airborne when the runway fell away beneath them. Through the aircraft's sensors, she could feel the ground effect dissipating and the freedom of three-dimensional movement opening around them. "Aurora 1 is airborne," she reported, but her voice carried a note of wonder that had nothing to do with professional communication protocols. Flying the Aurora wasn't like piloting an aircraft. It was like becoming a creature of the sky, something that belonged in the thin air and infinite spaces above the Earth. The neural interface translated her desires into motion so efficiently that the boundary between thought and action disappeared entirely. "How does she handle, Captain?" Mitchell's voice asked from the ground control station. "Like a dream," Raven replied. "Like the sky was waiting for her to come home." At 60,000 feet, the Aurora encountered the first test of its unconventional design philosophy. Raven pushed the aircraft through maneuvers that would have torn apart conventional airframes, feeling the machine respond to her commands with impossible grace. The neural interface allowed her to sense structural stress in real time, to feel the Aurora's limits as intimately as her own physical boundaries. "Beginning high-altitude performance evaluation," she reported, though her attention was focused on the strange new world of flight that the Aurora revealed. At this altitude, the sky was deep purple above and curved away beneath them in a view that belonged more to spacecraft than aircraft. Through the Aurora's enhanced sensors, she could detect electromagnetic signatures from satellites passing overhead, radio communications from aircraft hundreds of miles away, even the thermal signatures of cities far below. The machine's perception extended her own awareness into realms that redefined what it meant to fly. "Aurora 1, increase to Mach 3 and maintain current altitude," came the instruction from ground control. Raven complied, feeling the aircraft accelerate with the smooth inevitability of falling. The transition through the sound barrier was barely noticeable, just a slight change in the Aurora's acoustic signature as it left the realm of subsonic flight far behind. At Mach 3, the aircraft felt perfectly stable, as if this was its natural cruise condition. "Mach 3 achieved," she reported. "Aircraft feels like it wants to go faster." "Copy, Aurora 1. You are cleared to explore extended flight envelope at pilot discretion." The invitation was like opening a door to a new form of existence. Raven let her thoughts flow through the Aurora's control systems, asking the aircraft to show her what it was truly capable of. The response was immediate and breathtaking. Acceleration pressed her back into the seat as the Aurora climbed and accelerated simultaneously, transitioning smoothly through Mach 4, Mach 5, beyond the edge of conventional atmosphere and into the realm where the sky began to fade to black. At Mach 6 and 90,000 feet altitude, the Aurora flew in an environment that was more space than air, sustained by engineering principles that challenged everything she thought she knew about flight. "Aurora 1, please confirm altitude and airspeed," ground control requested, and Raven could hear the disbelief in the controller's voice even through the professional communication protocols. "Altitude 90,000 feet, airspeed Mach 6.2 and climbing," she reported. "Aircraft systems nominal. I repeat, all systems nominal." But nominal was inadequate to describe what she was experiencing. Through the neural interface, she could feel the Aurora's systems operating in perfect harmony, engines that functioned more like controlled explosions than conventional power plants, flight control surfaces that manipulated airflow in ways that seemed to violate basic physics, and stealth characteristics that made them essentially invisible to any detection system currently in existence. "Aurora 1, return to base for debrief. Outstanding performance, Captain." Raven began the descent back toward Groom Lake, but part of her remained in that rarefied realm where the Aurora belonged, in the space between sky and void, where conventional rules no longer applied. She was ready for whatever waited in hostile airspace. The mission briefing took place in a room that didn't officially exist, staffed by personnel whose names appeared on no organizational charts, planning an operation that would never be acknowledged by any government agency. Raven sat at the head of the conference table, still feeling the residual effects of her neural connection to the Aurora. The sensation was addictive, that expansion of awareness, that sense of being something more than merely human. Colonel Vasquez activated the wall displays, showing satellite imagery of a mountain range in an unnamed region of the Middle East. The target area, she began. 17 confirmed aircraft losses in the past 6 months, including 2 of our most advanced reconnaissance platforms. Whatever's operating out, there has capabilities that exceed our current threat assessment parameters. Intelligence analyst Thornfield pulled up thermal imaging data. We've identified what appears to be an underground facility built into this mountain complex. The electromagnetic signature suggests power generation on a scale that doesn't match any known installation in the region. Underground facility means limited escape routes, Raven observed, studying the terrain. But it also means they've had time to establish comprehensive defensive systems. What are we looking at for surface-to-air threats? Unknown, Mitchell admitted. That's part of what makes this mission necessary. We need intelligence on their capabilities before we can plan larger operations. Vasquez highlighted specific coordinates on the display. Your primary objective is reconnaissance and assessment. Get close enough to map their defensive network, identify the aircraft that have been engaging our platforms, and return with actionable intelligence. And if they try to engage the Aurora? Raven asked. Then you demonstrate why we spent 15 years developing aircraft that operates outside conventional flight parameters, Mitchell replied. The Aurora's stealth characteristics should make detection difficult, but if you are compromised, you have authorization to defend yourself using any means necessary. Thornfield pulled up technical specifications for weapons systems that Raven had never seen before. The Aurora carries experimental directed energy weapons, he explained. Laser systems that can engage targets at ranges and speeds that conventional munitions can't match. Raven absorbed the tactical picture, her mind already beginning to formulate approach vectors and contingency plans. The neural interface seemed to enhance her tactical thinking as well as her flying ability. She could visualize multiple scenarios simultaneously, considering options and outcomes with a clarity that felt almost supernatural. Weather window opens in 18 hours, Vasquez announced. Satellite coverage will be minimal during your ingress, and we'll have communications blackout for approximately 40 minutes while you're over the target area. Extraction plan, Raven asked. You bring yourself home, Mitchell said simply. The Aurora is designed for independent operation. If something goes wrong, you have the speed and altitude capability to outrun anything they can put in the air. Raven nodded, though she felt a familiar chill at the implications. Independent operation was military euphemism for expendable. If the mission went sideways, there would be no rescue, no backup, no official acknowledgement that she had ever existed. Any questions, Captain? Just one, Raven said. When this is over, what happens to me? The silence that followed suggested she already knew the answer. Win or lose, succeed or fail, this mission would be her last official act as a pilot. The Aurora was too valuable to risk on repeated missions, and she knew too much about too many classified programs to simply return to civilian life. Let's focus on the mission, Captain, Mitchell said finally. Midnight at Groom Lake was illuminated by work lights around the Aurora, casting harsh shadows across the aircraft's angular surfaces. Technicians performed final systems checks, while Raven completed her pre-flight inspection. Though inspection was an inadequate term for the neural interface's comprehensive diagnostic routine that let her feel the health of every component aboard the aircraft. Dr. Chen approached with the neural interface helmet, her expression carrying the weight of 15 years of theoretical engineering about to be tested under combat conditions. Remember, Captain, the Aurora's AI will handle routine flight operations, but tactical decisions remain entirely under your control. Trust the machine, but trust yourself more. Raven nodded as she settled into the cockpit. The seat molded itself around her body, and she felt the subtle vibrations as the aircraft's systems synchronized with her nervous system. By now, the initial connection felt natural, that strange expansion of awareness that transformed her from a pilot into something closer to a hybrid intelligence. "Aurora 1, you are cleared for immediate departure," came the voice from the control tower. Even the communications protocols had been streamlined for this mission. No lengthy radio checks, no extended taxi procedures. Just the simple acknowledgement that an aircraft worth more than a small nation's GDP was about to disappear into hostile airspace. Raven engaged the engines with a thought and felt the Aurora respond with eager anticipation. The aircraft wanted to fly, wanted to test itself against whatever waited in those mountain ranges halfway around the world. Through the neural interface, she could sense the machine's confidence, 15 years of engineering perfection ready to prove its worth. Takeoff was smooth and swift, the Aurora transitioning from ground operations to supersonic flight in seconds rather than minutes. Raven climbed rapidly through the Nevada night, watching the lights of Las Vegas fall away beneath them as they ascended toward flight levels where commercial aviation never ventured. At 70,000 feet and Mach 4, the Aurora was in its element. The aircraft flew with mechanical perfection through the thin air, its stealth characteristics rendering it invisible to ground-based radar systems. Through the neural interface, Raven could feel electromagnetic signals washing over them, radar pulses, satellite communications, radio transmissions from aircraft far below, but none of them detected the Aurora's passage. "Navigation systems locked on target area," she reported to ground control, though she knew this would be one of the last communications until her return. Once she entered hostile airspace, radio silence would be absolute. "Copy, Aurora 1. Good hunting, Captain." The phrase carried weight beyond its simple words. Good hunting implied prey, and prey implied a predator. As Raven guided the Aurora eastward through the darkness, she wondered which role she would play when they finally encountered whatever was waiting in those mountains. Behind them, the lights of America faded into darkness. Ahead lay unknowns that would test both pilot and machine in ways that no simulation could prepare them for. The real mission was just beginning. Over the North Atlantic at 90,000 feet, the Aurora flew through darkness so complete that the stars above seemed close enough to touch. At this altitude, the aircraft existed in a realm between atmosphere and space, sustained by engineering that pushed the boundaries of physical possibility. Through the neural interface, Raven could feel the machine's systems operating in perfect harmony, engines that functioned more like controlled fusion than conventional combustion flight surfaces that manipulated airflow through principles that seemed almost magical. The crossing took less than an hour at the Aurora's cruise speed of Mach 6. Below them, commercial aviation crawled along at subsonic speeds, their occupants unaware that something from the far edge of technological possibility was passing overhead like a shadow made of speed and silence. "Approaching European airspace," Raven reported to her own navigation systems, since radio silence now extended to all ground communications. The Aurora's AI provided constant updates through the neural interface: fuel status, system health, threat assessment, navigation accuracy, but the information flowed through her consciousness like additional thoughts rather than mechanical readouts. She adjusted course slightly to avoid a high-altitude research balloon, the Aurora's sensors detecting the small target from over 100 miles away. The aircraft's perception extended far beyond human senses, creating a bubble of awareness that encompassed hundreds of cubic miles of airspace. As they passed over the Mediterranean, Raven began to feel the first stirrings of genuine concern. The target area was still an hour away, but intelligence reports suggested that whatever technology they were about to encounter operated by rules that challenged conventional understanding of aerial warfare. Pilots didn't simply die when they engaged these unknown aircraft. They disappeared, sometimes leaving only fragments of radio transmission that spoke of impossible acceleration and weapons systems that defied classification. The Aurora descended slightly to 60,000 feet as they approached the Middle Eastern coast. At this altitude, The aircraft remained well above the service ceiling of known surface-to-air systems, but Raven's tactical instincts were firing warning signals. Something about the electromagnetic spectrum ahead felt wrong, too quiet, as if normal radio traffic had been deliberately suppressed. "Approaching target area in 15 minutes, she announced to the empty cockpit, though the Aurora's AI was already adjusting flight parameters for reconnaissance operations. Through the neural interface, she could feel the aircraft's sensors shifting to maximum sensitivity, preparing to map whatever defensive network had been established in those mountains. The night sky ahead was clear, stars visible in sharp detail through the Aurora's enhanced vision systems. But somewhere in that apparent emptiness, something was waiting. Something that had claimed the lives of pilots who were among the best in the world. Raven checked the Aurora's weapons systems, experimental directed energy systems that could engage targets at ranges measured in hundreds of miles. The technology was theoretical, untested in actual combat, but it represented humanity's best guess at how to fight opponents who possessed capabilities that exceeded current understanding. 10 minutes to target. The real test was about to begin. The mountain range appeared on the Aurora's sensors long before it became visible to conventional observation. Through the neural interface, Raven could feel the terrain below as a three-dimensional map of electromagnetic signatures, thermal patterns, and gravitational variations. What she sensed there made her breath catch in her throat. The mountains weren't just hiding a facility. They had been transformed into something that resembled a fortress more than a natural formation. Electromagnetic signatures indicated power systems running deep underground, connected by a network of tunnels that extended for miles through the mountain complex. Heat signatures showed activity levels that suggested a substantial population, and the geometric precision of certain formations implied construction on a scale that challenged everything intelligence had suggested about this region. "Jesus," Raven whispered, forgetting momentarily that radio silence prevented her from sharing what she was discovering. Through the Aurora's perception, she could see defensive installations that had been carved into the mountainside itself, weapons systems that appeared to be tracking her aircraft despite its stealth characteristics. The neural interface suddenly flooded with warning signals as the Aurora's threat assessment.